ट्रांजिशन लिंक शेयर करने पर
क्या थी?
तेरा माइक ऑफ रहा
हाँ कर रहे थे
of my other esteemed colleagues and their students. And something struck me at that point that um, what our past experiences actually form the basis of who we are. So we look at people who are reflecting, collecting, moving on, and filling our jola. So the word jola is a very important term that I use today. What is that jola? It is something in which you collect, you possess, you carry, you transport, you share. So the jola has multiple meanings. It is also a place where you keep the things that are dear to you in a secure manner. So things in your jola are safe, but they're also for giving away and they are also for several other things. So the jola becomes our topic today, in which and around which we will talk about a few things. So what is the jola about? And so the jola is about memories, experiences, objects, incidents, things that we recall, our engagements, embedded ideas that form all the way from us as children, that connect us to our families, our childhood, our grandparents, the homes of our grandparents, the villages we grew up in, the cities we grew up in, all of that. So the jola actually comes preloaded, and we begin to discover that jola over a period of time. Architecture as a learning and a practice afford us to look into this jola at will. So that also, so what I was talking about are embedded ideas, also human communication. Memory is about whom we have heard, what we have said to other people, what they have said to us, and what we have exchanged with people also form a very important component of what we become. And nature, of course, the tree you remember when you were in school, or the fragrance in a garden, or something, a fruit that you picked up, and the shape of the fruit or the seed, and so many things actually become part of this enrichment. And that enrichment is the basis for us to dwell or reflect upon. So to dwell is to slow down and think. To dwell is also to be within and also extract and understand a lot of things by dwelling upon things. So the Jola actually is a very important thing, and it's very dear to all of us. It's very dear to me. That and the Jola also has been something which is, it doesn't have a bottom. It's bottomless. You keep filling in, and it keeps coming back with new surprises when you dwell and to think. When you begin to observe what you have been experiencing. So, what is the Jola about? The Jola is about discovering and stumbling upon various things. So, what do you stumble upon? Do you miss by? Do you pass by it? Or do you stop and do you observe and do you try to question what this is about? And I think that is the first prerequisite for being able to add something to that Jola and look into the Jola. So, here I stumbled upon a home somewhere near Nagaur when we were traveling, and I saw these four beer bottles and a slab with a cutout and this little structure on top, very hastily plastered together with some mortar. And then I discovered that there is a cavity in that wall, and that cavity goes all the way down into a kitchen below into a chula. So this is a chimney. And so this is something I picked up, put into my jola as an understanding of how simple things are put together out of nothing, out of waste, for you and meaningful stuff for somebody else, and the work is done and it is functioning beautifully. So how many such experiences have we collected, and how many such experiences do we begin to see? So the same purpose of extracting air is now seen here in my own home with a machine finished ventilator which spins and extracts air. And to add to it, what we experimented with is in summer, you take this hay and dump it on the roof. so that the heat is not transmitted as quickly as it would have if the hay was not there. And so you have delayed the heat from touching the roof, and so you are relatively cooler within. This was an experiment done. The hay is purchased from a local Bharwad who sells hay. It's put on the roof, and when just before the first monsoon, the hay is given back to the Bharwad for the cattle. So our purpose is done, and we have connected somehow with the agrarian and the cycle around the place where we live. So this experiment we did quite some time for a lot of years until the hay became very expensive and untenable. But at least it was a learning. In Nagaur, you find the same principle of extracting air, catching air in these very beautiful formal structures. This is Ail Shatragarh, and this is a very beautiful structure from where air actually is trapped in and let down into the hammam space below. So from the first slide to the third one, we notice that there are varying degrees of formality, purpose, a varying degree of formality, construction, method, craft, yet the purpose remains the same. When we talk about water, we find these structures in the Thar Desert. A friend of ours took us there, and we discovered these beautiful kuis in the middle of the sand, constructed out of slabs from local stone. And they are not more than a meter wide, and they go down almost about 30 meters to 40 meters deep, and there are people who still dig them. So this is a very beautiful observation about how water is managed. This is a berry in a lake bed in Jaisalmer, where when the lake dries up, the berry actually still has moisture and water which people can draw in summer. And this is Jaseri Talam, again in Jaisalmer district, which is a perennial lake. It's been around, not dry for several uh, decades, I think maybe centuries. And it's been dug open, renovated, replenished, but the water is always there. That means there is a deeper system which is supporting this whole endeavor. Then there are methods where society is connected with water and water is connected with the pastoral systems of rearing and managing cattle all over the desert. So these are draw wells which use camels, and then you see cattle coming in and drinking. And these are things that one would say are not connected with what we do as a profession. They are not, they have nothing to do with us. Then why is it so important to me? And I feel that these are the things that actually sort of support certain thought processes and deeper understandings of our people, our culture, our society, and our systems that are inclusive in nature. And I think inclusivity is a very important aspect of what we do and think. While we do this, there is also a quick documentation. It is not just an image that you take a picture, but you also quickly draw what you have seen. So this is a sketch done by Mosby of what that structure actually is. And then what are the different kinds of structures? This is the section I showed you. And then as we traveled, there were several such things which were recorded. Then we come to Persian wheels used in to draw water in Kumbhalgarh. This is a living tradition. If you go there now, you will find this in operation. But you have to go all the way and travel and discover this for yourself. And right now, these Persian wheels irrigate the local agriculture farms. And there are potters who make these kind of structures for this purpose. So there is a demand for water. There is an available craft which is provided by the potters, and then they will complete that circle of life together. So everything is connected. It is not disjointed. Water is a very important part of our culture, and how and what we do with it. This is Mahakut in Karnataka, close to Badami. And one of the most beautiful complexes around water that you have to visit and see. So I am sharing these little things which constitute our Jhola. Okay, and this was taken last year, and this is Sarkej. This is last year, and all of a sudden, all the water in ways which had been blocked for several, probably a decade, and the rain got too much, and it broke all its barriers and found its way into this place. And so you again had this sluice working and everything back in place. Then we look at what this is the traditional method that I showed you. This is a plinth which is by a water structure, and that you see that metal tank and that RCC tank is what the government has built exactly over there by making a borewell. This is in Shekhawati. And you realize the degradation of understanding, of knowledge, of systems from what was people centric to a provider oriented approach. So the people manage their water, but now we have providers for everything, and they will provide, and you will be the recipients of what is dished out and given to you. So these are the things that we realize and reflect upon. Then this photograph was taken in Udaipur, and it made me think about what and why would one somebody do this? Why would this be done? Yeah, makes you think. And I'll leave you on that thought. On this side, this is basically taking water from a traditional leather holster sort of a bucket into a plastic bottle. It also says a lot about where we are. So this is also about photography, and this is also about observation and documentation and putting all these things into your Jola so that you can be aware and sensitized to what is going on around you. In Rajasthan, this is the Thar desert. These are the tracks in the desert. And in the same desert, this is how rain-fed farming happens. So now we look at agriculture as something else to put into your Jola, that it is not different or separate from what we have already seen. So here, how is it that this knowledge exists in this region, and this is a continued practice right now around Jaisalmer? And then in our own garden, discovery of how you can grow organically, what you can grow, how it grows, what is its structure, what is the difference between growing a pumpkin and a bottle gourd or a snake gourd or beans or other things. And these are the things that one observes because they're all embedded with ideas of structure, resilience, and stability. When a pumpkin grows heavy, how and what it does this how it supports itself is an observation in understanding structure, so that these things are connected with what we do on a daily basis, so these observations become very important. And this was a very beautiful thing I saw. This is a brinjal. It's been split into four zones, and there are these crossed bamboo sticks which are kept here, and it is hung by its tail on a piece of wood, and it is about hanging 5 feet up in the air so that it dries well and the seed can be harvested. So this is a method of harvesting that the seed from that precious best brinjal that you have selected from your plant, and this is the method by which you dry it and extract the seed. What I see here is ingenuity, understanding of nature, and also at the bottom of everything that we talk about is care. Do you care? That person cares for this. So he has taken the trouble to detail this, and this is what we extract and put into our system. This is again in close to Nagore. This is called lai. It's lai. So this is basically a wooden stick. Then, if you look at this detail, this is skin of any animal, maybe buffalo skin, and these are reeds from a particular grass that grows in southern India and parts in southern India. It's a reed. It's a very stiff and hard piece of wood. This is brought in traditionally from years and processed in this place, tied up together with this kind of gut, and you make this, and this is called a pitchfork. It's a pitchfork to take hay and put it and transport it. Now, this is a fantastic piece of craft, almost unbelievably beautifully finished in detail. And one of the things is that the people who make and process the wood, that community is different. The people who finish the wood is different. The people who assemble it is different. The community that manages the leather for this is different. The parchment. And so all of these people in one village work in a synergistic manner to produce this piece of utilitarian value. I thought that this was most beautifully collaborative. People and spaces. Somewhere near Sirohi, there is a range, mountain range, end of the Aravallis, and within that there are these kind of cave-like spaces which are habited by saints and sadhus. And what you are seeing here is a local justice court. It's a local justice court within that area. This guy here is the main person who gives the verdict. So if there is a family feud or whatever, they'll all go there first and he will sort things out. And for us, these are systems which we are not aware of until you actually go there. But what excites you is the nature of life, the space within which this is happening and where it is happening. So this again is an important thing to say. When we go and see cities, this is Jodhpur on the night, on the evening of Diwali. Half the city is out shopping and enjoying. And this is, of course, in southern India. We look at domestic details of how this is in Badami. What is it to embellish one's home, and how is it that through very minimal means people manage to beautify and make their home special? Then there is this minimal home. This is in Ratnagiri, where there's just essentials. I'm not taken showing you another photograph of the kitchen, which is also quite interesting. But you see the light and you see the surface and the walls and its simplicity. And this is a master class in articulation of how surface, steps, embellishment, volume, connection between upper and lower. I mean, we could kill to know how to do this, and yet it is a struggle to achieve this. But this is done so simply and so intuitively, and that is what we learn from this. And this is in Aurangabad. I was particularly fascinated with the way this space is managed. I mean, there is one surface here, another surface here, and through this, you actually have carved out movement. How is that done? And is it possible for us to have these memories in our Jola when we work? And is it possible that we can stop to think and recall these experiences and see in the beginning if we can even try to emulate it? Because in that emulation, there is a certain practice. And in that practice, you will discover yourself and how you imagine space. This is another beautiful house near Gwalior in the middle of a farm, built out of stone slabs and a simple mud plinth, thatch roof, no less modern and climatically very, very sensitively done. Ventilation very required when you're sleeping in the farm. warm air goes out, there is space left for the roof to function. Everything that we need to know is here. So how do you absorb this is the question. And then there are traditional methods, systems, craft, and space, privacy, porosity, and spaces for communicating. This is a 2 or 3 seater space. This is in Jaisalmer in the Jain temple, and so beautifully done. And the scale changes. This is for a different purpose. This is a fort wall in Ranakpur and Kumbhalgarh, and you see the purpose changes, the scales change, so many things are different. And then you find innovation everywhere. This is in Jodhpur, in Shekhawati, and these tires actually come from aircraft. And this donkey cart is put together, assembled. Then we look at aesthetics, embellishment, completely over the top, according to us, but absolutely comfortable for most. And yet, it has a certain character, which is so one is an example of something which is like really, really embellished. And here you see technology, function, minimalism. This is a small charging panel in the middle of the Thar desert used by the pastoralists. Where there is water, they carry this with them, they plug this device in and charge their phones. And so we have a community which has survived for thousands of years, innovating with technology, growing with technology, and still holding on to what they do best. So this is a very important observation. And then again, an example that was the chakra. This is a rickshaw, and how amazing this is. And then we also recycle stuff. You know, all the plastic, all the stuff, it finds a place, a home. And shade is very important. So we will put up all of these things and create shade because that's very, very prized in our context. We see machines that make save for all of Indore. I mean, this is found in Indore, and this is like mass production. So there is a product and there's mass production. And so Punjab is even more creative than some of these things that we see. And we come to aesthetics, embellishment, decoration. We can go to any extent. The raw beauty of the Indian elephant is not enough. Now, this is about Shringar. This is about embellishing that and taking it to completely another level. And we encounter this in architecture all the time. And this slide to me is about this person who makes bhel on a small stand. And it's about the aesthetics of arrangement, of color, of texture, and all of these things. This is in Udaipur. This lady sells flowers just outside the Jagdish temple. And this is a quilt from Saurashtra, I think, which is so incredibly contemporary, but must be about 125 years old, 150 years old. We have simple tools to do really great things. And here I discovered this structure with a purpose. And this has stayed with us for a long time now. Because its manifestations in the form of fabric and shade and trellis structures and landscape and biophilic surfaces, all these things, this simple structure has the potential to take on several roles. So what are the broad issues now that we look at? So we look at context, history, precedent, place, ecology, native genius, and identity. Native genius is something that is innate of the land, and somebody or some person or someone who can innovate out of nothing. And all of this is in the context of society, its beliefs, and the bottom line is frugality. How can you do something without spending too much? And that is the Indian ethos, largely. Except, of course, when you choose to spend, then you really do. But largely, it's about managing things with um, objects and systems that are extremely simple and yet innovative. And in that lie our sensibilities. So, having shown you what goes into the Jola briefly and what the issues are broadly that we look at, this these set of 12 or 13 things that I've written down are distilled from the education we have received, distilled from a lot of ways in which we were taught in the early stages of our architectural education, and things that have remained as a system of frames through which you view work even today. This by no means is a prescription, but this is something which is being shared to help you discover your own foothold of how you could view yourself and your work and the process that you follow. So one of the things that are very important for us are how do we devise frames of view to understand the physical realities of site, program, and people, to embed intent and meaning. Learning to address and examine issues from the larger scale to the specific simultaneously, and defining one's position with respect to one's attitude to land, to climate and context. Plan organization is defined by organizing principles. What are those? How does one arrive at a diagram that captures the essentials of your position? What are spatial relationships? What are scales of operation from the individual to the collective? Parts as contributors to the whole, but not merely a summation. Plan as a generator of structure, form, and character that embodies an understanding of the systems of construction and materiality at the outset. Formal controlled expression versus an emerging system generated. So, in today's context, this becomes very important. The ability to control lies in your hands and in your mind. One seeks new ways of putting things together. What then are your tools? Expression is an outcome of systemic choices, materiality, meaningful assemblage of elements examined against program, context, economics, extractions, and interpretations from vernacular traditions to evolve new hybrids. We look at articulation in both thought and detail, seen as an outcome of a mediation between various entities with the overall design intent in mind. Identifying the mediator is key. And the last point is intuition. So these are the thoughts that actually um, embody some of the things and the processes we deploy in our work. And these find resonance in how we discovered ourselves as students and what we heard and what it meant then and what it means to us today. So I think the stage at which you are right now as students is very important because you will be joining these dots eventually and they will be very defining. The other important aspect of our work is to discover design intent and strategies that become generators of architectural expression. So, what is your intent? What are you deploying as a strategy to do and inform the process? And eventually, what is that interesting expression is leading to? And I think that is what excites us a lot. So in that we look at architectural layering. It means, in a way, architectural layering and porosity kind of go hand in hand. It is also about making something uh, porous and hence habitable, while being seemingly opaque, but it is not. So opaque to the point that it has a climatic responsibility, if I talk about a building, but then it is so layered that that opacity is actually not a wall. That opacity is a combination of spaces and layers that create a very porous interiority. And I think that porosity is very important in our context. So something seemingly opaque can also be very porous. Honest, compatible material choices will help you get there. And in that, we seek opportunities for conviviality. Seeking design anchors is very important. Embed ideas and meaning into the program. So if you have a program, it is so the program is actually, the program brief is never the architectural intent. And it's important to subvert the program to discover new dimensions to inform the design process. Thermal comfort, material emissivity, shielding from heat, draining heat gained to water, evolving passive techniques that engage traditional wisdom, emissivity and materiality, nighttime cooling, attempting to synergize technologies across disciplines to innovate emergent aesthetic and expression. The last line means that, are we aware of what is happening in the automobile industry? Are we aware of what is happening in the heating ventilation industry? What are they up to? And what are the fundamental thought processes that are informing their decisions about how you will stay comfortable? Are you looking into those things to discover where there can be change? And what are those technologies that are very simple, that can be deployed for very simple common purposes? So that search is an ongoing search. You have to be talking to people and finding out. So this is something which I have shared here, and this is stuff that we are engaged with. So while we talked about the architectural process and the memory of discovering things and how they lead us into the design process and support the design process, the technical anchors also are very important. So the technical anchors look at structural systems and economies. When do you use a load bearing system? When do you go for frame? When do you use steel? When do you use steel and glass? When do you use rammed earth? There is a method to deciding that. That method is not an aesthetic choice in many ways. It is a choice that emanates from what is it that is demanded of you and what is the purpose of that structure. So this is very important. So we look at confined masonry construction, which is, very economical in our context. Also water centric and thermal comfort centric design approaches. So when you say water centric, it is about where are we building? Is there a lot of water or is there no water at all? And how does that affect the way we take decisions? So we cannot say that, oh, the water will come in from the tap and it will go down the drain. You need to dwell deeper into the whole understanding of water from a very different perspective in order to define a water centric approach to architecture. So that is a very important consideration. Then we look at alternative and mainstream materials like lime construction and other appropriate methods. So the discovery of lime in construction is not new. I mean, we started working with it since 2008, I think 2009, and we have found that it's quite interesting to use that material. Also, quite interesting that the material leads you to certain kind of discipline of construction which lime requires. So we are trying to learn how to build with lime, while holding on to certain ways of known ways of working that we already have been practicing. So there is a lot of unlearning of what is known when you adopt a new material and try to learn with it. So you have to, jettison quite a few of your known parameters of understanding design and structure when you work with line. And of course, looking at labor intensive approaches which help create employment and opportunities for a lot more people. So you make choices that are more hand oriented and labor oriented rather than machine finished and those kind of things, because this is still a big reality in our country. So to sum it up, water, air, light, air changes in a room or in a space, heat, emissivity, the thermal flywheel. This I will explain when we get to the projects. Cooling, structure cooling, thermal draining, and screening. These actually define our palette. So Mitesh was asking me about drawing, and then I thought that we have this little slide on drawing where we try to find out as we draw. That's a very important thing. So I don't know if you can see this sketch at all. It's too faint. There's nothing on that side, right? So there's a pencil drawing. This project is unbuilt. It is an Upashaya in Ahmedabad, which we were asked to design. And these are some of the early ideas. It's in a residential neighborhood where, to explain to you briefly, it's a very small plot of land, about uh, 20 meters, about 15 meters by 15 meters square, in which this thing was, the structure was inscribed. And the idea here was to not use cement, steel, no electricity, no water supply drainage. It was a building just in timber and lime. And so in this building, what we thought was the entire foundation is actually a harvesting system. So this is the model. This is the existing neighborhood, and it has two levels of basement, and it has two levels above and a roof. And here in this model, you can see the timber system, and these are all lime bricks with lime mortar. And this was a wall section which was done. And this is just a quick walk through the plan. The lower level, the upper level. What is important is the section. So this entire lower two levels and the basement below ground is an entire water system. And this timber structure, actually, the building is only this much. And you can see the proportion of how much it is below ground and what is above ground. And this entire thing is a massive harvesting system with a draw well, which is outside in the compound to provide water for the munis who will stay inside. So this was a very interesting exercise, and it tests a lot of things that we are habituated to about working. And then suddenly somebody says there's no steel, there's no glass, there's no hardware, everything is in timber and lime, and so the game completely changes. These are examples of water harvesting tanks which we build in homes. This is how the process starts. This is a way in which you create an inverted dome below and then eventually construct this structure, ferroconcreted, and then you have this tank built, and that is how it sits in our garden. So this was the first experiment done for creating a water harvesting system which was trying to break the syntax barrier of cost per liter. After that, several such experiments were done. This is the Upashray, this is the Natrani amphitheater section, this is the house in Adipur and our own house. And so this is kind of common practice now with a lot of the work. Wherever we are able to get the karigars, we do these kind of tasks. The other aspect of our work is lime, where discovering the chakki, and then from that to this house which is under construction right now in Ahmedabad, where we use premixed bags of lime mortar to actually do mortars and plasters. So we've come a long way from the old traditional method of slaking the lime and all of that process, coming to um, working with pre-bagged materials wherever it is possible. Also, working with lime construction on a school project with a fairly big contractor to mainstream and make sure that large projects can also be done in lime. This was a school of about 50 to 60,000 square feet in Palanpur, built entirely out of lime. These are finishes, basically dolomite plasters and methods of application of plaster. So this is brick wall, this is concrete, and this is the first coat of plaster. I'm not getting into the details of all this. This is just to give you an idea of the range of things that are possible with the kind of approach I have been talking about. And on this side, we actually hammer the concrete, and the hammered concrete actually takes the mortar. This, in my view, is not a great method to do plasters. So we discovered this is the traditional method in Rajasthan, where they use a small hammer with a little rod at the end, and they puncture the wet plaster to create a surface on which the next layer of plaster can be put. So we, drawing from this, what we did was all concrete surfaces. This is a concrete surface in a home where we use bubble wrap as the inner surface on inside the shuttering. So when we de-shuttered, all our beams and faces of columns were like this. So it eliminates, and this was waste bubble wrap rolls which we got from somewhere and put them inside. Now what this does is it eliminated that process which was destructive in nature. You have a structure which is built, and then one guy sitting and hammering away at that structure, chipping away at the concrete, while this is possible to do. So this is what we are seeking in day-to-day work, how you can change certain practices and make things better so that your systems work the way you want them to. And then here you have different samples of lime which we do, and I'll move to a few works that I want to show you today. So this I've included to just kind of walk you through some of the stages of the project, from the initial site visit to the final outcome of the project. So this is Chapi village near Palanpur, and away from that, this site was given to us for a school. So there's a government school in here. That government school is now relocated here, and there is a sponsor, a trust which wants to build a school for the government, and the government would rent that school from the trust, because the government generally doesn't have capital costs to make new schools. So this is an interesting situation where the government gives the school, the trust builds the school and gives it back to the government. So it's like a, so this is one such thing. So when you looked at the site, fortunately now for Google, you can see a lot of detail. So you can see where the natural drainage is. There's a railway line and certain aspects of the terrain. You can see the core of the village and how it kind of peters out as you move out. And this is the site for the school. This is the nature of the land. Scrub land. It's called Kharaba in Gujarat. Kharaba land. It's grazing land. People, it's out in the open. And so there are these mounds, and then there is water cutting through it. And so that is the site for the school. And so these are my initial sketches about what we encountered on the first day at the site. So there are these little notes about where are the streams, or where does the water generally flow, what are the internal, what's the internal structure informed by how the water has drained through the site. And so this is the observation you take back home to dwell on. And then here there is also aspects of, then layer 2 is about what is functional, what is formal, what does the ground tell you, and where do you think it would be advisable to locate the structures. And these are studies of various aspects of scale and what is above, below, establishing the new ground, and sketches of how things actually formally assemble together. So from here we go to slightly more concretized sketches, looking at the program, and then actually beginning to understand the composition of spaces, sections, drawing by hand slowly to understand. This is the most important process. It still happens, and I don't think it will go. And it is essential to slow down, because when you're drawing, your mind connects with what you want to do differently. When you are using the screen as a medium, I mean, this is purely personal. The screen as a medium is a difficult tool to understand scale, and so you miss the point. So in order to understand scale, you will have to slow down and put it down on ground to know what you are going to eventually do. Once that is done, the other medium is fantastic, because then once the core ideas are in place, then a lot of things can be developed from that point on very quickly. But this essential slowness in the beginning is a very important tool. So compositionally about the school, there are two wings, and so this is the road from where you get dropped off. You come into a forecourt. This is the library. You go from underneath the library into another court, and you see a court here. But you keep climbing up the mound, and then you discover the Maidan, and you keep climbing up, and you come to the assembly hall, and you keep climbing up, and then you go up into the wilderness. So it's basically from here to here, there is almost a 4.5 meter gradient. So and then the Medan on one side. So here, this is local stone used from a nearby quarry. It was more expensive to transport the stone than the cost of the stone itself. So it can't be more local than that. And this was all lime mortar, and this is all lime plaster, which eventually was painted upon after 4 years. And that's the entry point. Then there are elements which actually work very beautifully when you want to create shade. This is the forecourt from where you go up to the library, but there is a space here where you can hang out, and the local elders from the village come and sit here and use that space when the school is not functioning. So it becomes a sort of an adda for them. But it's also a place which is kept open after the school, so that tuitions can be conducted, somebody can come and teach somebody, or students can stay back and do their homework together. So it is a space outside of the school. And this is the main court of the school, with simple vertical louvers in waterproof ply and timber. There is no glass in this building, and there are no metal grills. So the detailing actually is quite simple and robust. And this is, you're up on the mount. This is the prayer hall, and the educational wing, the academic wing with the labs on one side, and the ground drops all the way down. About 2,000 trees were planted on this, and each of the students were given, two students were given one tree to take care of over a 5 year period. And right now, this was taken when the building was completed, but right now it is a very, very green, filled out campus. Sometimes we take temporary decisions. There are trees planted on, sorry, Over here, there are trees planted here which eventually will shade this open area. But while that happens, there was a detail using a simple grey net that was made so that students actually can sit in the shade. So you get this kanat kind of a thing, and that's how they sit in the shade. And it's a very simple detail like this. There's a steel cable, there's a ring, there is a Nevar patta, and this is granite and with eyelets. So you can actually slide this and remove it when you want to. One of the important things about schools is also, particularly this school in this neighborhood, was the absence of girl children in the school because of proper sanitation facilities. So it was very important to detail this out very properly. So here you see the girls' toilet, and there is a small sanitary waste chute here which goes outside the building into a wheelbar. Okay, and there is a changing facility with its own wash space so that you go down to the last level of detail that is required for that person to attend school. And that to us was a very, very important thing to do because that is the responsibility of the architect. To not imagine that something would happen, but actually go down to the detail and live that experience, not as the other, instructing somebody to do it, but doing it yourself so that you understand the detail. So, this was very important in the school. And subsequently, in the following year, the number of girl children in that school exceeded the number of boys, which was quite amazing. And this was something which the client actually was aware of. And then we researched and we found out that this is a common problem across schools and that something needed to be done about it. So even in the smaller renovations that we have done for schools, we have included this. This is the Living and Learning Design Center in Ajrakpur, Kutch. I don't know how many of you may have visited this place. This was done, it started in 2006, I think, and finished in 2016. And right now we're working on the second phase. So this was a place for the crafts of Kutch that would be showcased in a museum, and there are also workshops where artisans come and train other younger artisans. And so this is the site in Ajakpur, and again here the process of design of deliberating with the program, and it was a large project, complex one to decipher and put things together. And so the process went on for almost 2 years to manage. And then, so here there are various studies done of all the things that we talked about, primarily material, context, climate. What is it to build a museum in a context of Kutch? After the government museum, which was there since a long time, this was the first museum that was constructed. And with meager budgets, how are you able to create a museum that is truly Indian in its operation, not following the diktats of what is happening in the more developed world. So this was the mandate from the client. And so a lot of the decisions taken here were about creating a building that is ahead of its time in terms of its ability to handle people and scales. It's also about how uh, it would be difficult to air condition the whole building. So, what are the alternatives that you can evolve from the early inception of the idea of the project to make it thermally viable and economical? So, that was the primary thought. So, these are some of the sketches and ideas that were developed through a collaborative effort with our team, and a lot of the drawings over here that you see, all these sections have all been compiled together. Two members sit here, Nitesh and Mona, who have worked on this project way back, and had a major role to play in all the initial work that went in. So I'm glad that they are here and looking at this. So what are the facades like? What is the space like? What are the sections for various uh, components of the design? And these were all initial studies that went in. And this was a mammoth task which we realized only when we had started the model. It started off with this little tower here, and then the rest started building around it. And before we realized, we did not have space in the studio to keep this model. So we would put together tables and chairs and assemble it to study it, and then it would go away in parts. But this was a major exercise to put something together, and I'm delighted that we could show this to you today. So eventually, this is what emerged almost 10 years later. The entry, the pavilion from where one accesses the forecourt, the ticket area, and the main museum building. So this was a system because of earthquake resistant construction. We used load bearing walls with confined concrete systems to make it resilient. And in that process, you had an architectural language that was about putting up defenses against the climate wherever possible and opening up and becoming very porous from within. This is the main entry point from where one accesses the galleries. And then if you see, while it is opaque outside, there are very interesting perforations and scoops of spaces which cut and modulate the light as you go within. And once you are within the belly of the building, the light is very somber and the glare is cut out. And once you are within the galleries, it actually becomes almost 50 to 60 lux, which is what the textiles and other things require within the building. And outside, it delights on the sun that it receives, the sun that it blocks, the sun that it allows in. There are trellis structures here which become shading devices. So a whole lot of things that we were initially collecting in our Jola were actually recalled in this first major project to be deployed. So spaces for people to congregate and move. So this is the space that leads you down to the lower courtyard. This is the eastern face. These are openings to the galleries which bring in very subdued light. This is the conservation area, the library, and the lower level workshops and the administration. And this was around the time of the inauguration where several things were put up. So what you see on this is the western facade where you have a kind of a colonnaded, shaded deep space at the lower level for people to move. And on the upper level, you have this open space within with these very fine apertures. So this is the lower level area, the auditorium, the central court, the transition spaces, the space where you arrive and you go up to the galleries or move down to the auditorium, and how the space is used on events and other occasions. So what I meant by layering in the earlier point I made was that the external face actually seems like an edifice, but then within that there are 2 or 3 layers before you encounter the inner habitable space. So in section, it basically layers itself to allow for the comfort that one requires within, which is a very important quality in the architecture that we see in our region. And there are these shaded inner courtyards which are tall and deep and narrow, so you get light only at certain points. This is at a little past noon, and then it kind of goes into shade. And then the forecourt actually had a lot of existing trees which we made use of, so that you move from one shaded enclave to the other before you enter into the building. The upper level, which is completely shielded, has these very interesting apertures from where the west breeze comes in. And these openings are designed to allow the winter sun to come in and keep away the summer sun. This is the southern facade, which again blocks the outer layer, and then there is an inner layer which opens into the gallery spaces. So this is basically the vocabulary of the outer shell, which is evolved with a certain idea about light and ventilation and shade in the context of Kutch. So here you have the outer wall, the movement, and then you have the inner wall, which is the administration. So you create these very beautiful shaded gullies to escape from one part of the building to the other and almost not be seen and yet be shaded in the harsh sun. This is the detail of the opening which allows the sun to break onto the edge but not penetrate within in summer. You also respond to the larger context. This is the skylights under construction in the galleries, which express themselves like this on the roof, while at the back you see these industries and their chimneys belching smoke outside. So there is a sort of a play that you engage in about what is it that you are leaving behind and what this will seem 50 years from now when you are engulfed in all these industrial buildings around the site, and then you sit there as the first person to arrive there and address the issues that you had imagined would emerge 50 years from now. So this was a very interesting take on what the project is, moving away from the regionalistic, vernacular, small scale, um, envisaging that this has to fit into a context which is beyond um, what we can imagine at that time. And so inside there was a curator who has worked with the inner space and designed this. And these are ways in which you create. This is a security grill, but it doesn't seem like one. It draws from motifs from Kutch, cut into little steel plates and assembled together to create a screen which becomes a security screen to the gallery below. And the inner shop and the spaces within it. And this is the current gallery on the lower level, which I showed you. So a lot of temporary exhibits happen here right now. And what it has evolved into is a very state-of-the-art museum with the outer surface occupied with really important artifacts displayed as per international norms with state-of-the-art lighting and climate control. I'll quickly show you 10 slides on what this building actually looks like in drawings and how it functions. So this is the lower court. To give you an idea, this is the overall master plan, out of which only a part of this wing and this much is constructed. All of this did not get constructed. Only the entrance got constructed. We are currently working on this part. So this is the lower court and the functions of the auditorium. Sorry. Yeah, yeah, that's the basement plan. And you have the lower court, the craft shop, workshop, storage, and classroom in the lower level. the upper floor, which is the museum galleries and the conservation block. And on this side, you have the artist residences and the guest house and the cafe. So here, quickly to explain what the strategies were, there were two pronged. One was the management of water, and the other was the thermal strategies. In that, rainwater, storm water, recharge wells, and the DWATs. And over here was shielding from the heat gained and draining the heat that is gained. So over here, uh, in this aspect, shielding from heat gain, we were looking at orientation and massing, shielding walls, mechanical floors, and here we were using cooling pipes, cooling tower, and a fresh air system. So this is where the harvesting tanks are, on the edge and the foundations, and the total capacities. So that's the roof and the water harvested at the bottom. And this is the stormwater management along the periphery, which takes all the rainwater and pushes it into the percolation wells, which currently don't function. These were test wells that we had built to understand the nature of water. There was an exploration to actually make a kund in the middle using dry masonry construction and help percolate the water that would accumulate in the court. That kund never got built, but we had detailed it out, and we have a beautiful SketchUp model of that, including the mortars and the way it can be put together. So this is slightly the more formal parts of the putting together of the project, orientation and massing in relation to um, the sun and the site and the conditions, where are the shadows, what happens to the courtyards, and then to understand how we need to shield from the south and the west. So here is a section which shows how you create a wall here, and then you can move here, and this is the habitable space. And on the upper level, you have a deep overhang, and this is the habitable space. So these sectional studies are very important to understand how you are going to layer this building and protect it. Over here is the section of the auditorium, which is embedded within the ground, and then you have the gallery on top, and here is the mechanical floor, which actually keeps the heat from coming into the gallery. So this was a very important sectional detail. So this is the way in which you understand the slice of the building and study where your gallery and habitable spaces are, and what kind of a shielding system one needs. And here, this red zone that you see is actually the zone that will take the brunt of the heat in the mechanical space, which is shown here. There are exhaust fans here which run through the night, and they empty that space of all the heat that is gained during the day. So those exhaust fans start at about 8 at night and go until the morning, and they cool that building space, the top layer, completely. And here the air conditioning units, which are actually working as dehumidifiers and part cooling in the galleries, are also situated in the mechanical floor. And here is the cooling tower, which actually I will explain here. So what happens here is, you see here, there are these cooling pipes which are laid in the China mosaic above on the roof, like this. So the entire roof of the museum is like this. And the heat that is gained is drawn from here and dumped back into the harvesting tank. And this water from the other end is pumped back into these channels, and then it remains there for some time and is dumped back again. So what it does is it draws the heat out from the roof and throws it into the harvesting tank, which is captive 4.5 lakh liters waiting to be consumed. and you're not going to drink all that all the time in one go. So this water circulates and acts as a thermal sink for taking the heat from the roof and pushing into the ground. This is the first time we tried this, uh, along with Mr. Surendra Shah, who was the engineer in Bombay, and we evolved this system and its architectural detailing to make it customized for this project. And it was also his first large attempt at using structure cooling. So there is this tower in the middle, which is the fresh air system. Here in this tower, there are 4 floors, and each of them are stacked with these blue crates, which are filled with waste bottled water from a nearby Wistleri plant. So it's the reject water which is bottled and put here. And what happens is at night, this water, there is a tank at the bottom here. This is filled with water. This water is pumped up and this water is sprayed onto these bottles throughout the night. And there is a fan here, show you here. So what happens here? Yeah, yeah. So there is a tank above, a tank below. This water circulates. It showers the um, bottles that are inside, and there is also a fan at the bottom which pulls air. So this air travels from here through this throughout the night. Now, what happens in summer is that the temperature in the desert sky at night, in the desert, is very low. So it could be about 45 degrees during the day, but at night time the dew point could go down to like 16 or 18 degrees for about 2 hours, and then it kind of starts rising again. So you know that the average night temperature for 4 5 hours will be in the 20s. So you take that cool air, push it over these bottles. In that process, you also sprinkling water, so that water transmits that to the bottles, and the entire mass of bottles within this tower becomes extremely cold by morning, also because of evaporative cooling that is happening in the dry desert air, and also catching the nighttime temperature. So with that, you actually create in this a mass which is extremely cool. It's about, so we have documented this with a proper monitoring system, and what you actually get is this storage of cold mass which you can push wherever you want. So what happens is that now this tower has this cool mass, and we push that into the auditorium when there is a program, and there is a dehumidifier here and one dehumidifier here which pushes dry air into this. So the auditorium actually gets 29 degrees temperature consistently, because it's also half beneath the ground. And so there are these diffusers here from where below the seat this air keeps flowing into the auditorium. The same air actually is pushed into the admin area. So this is a plan of the admin area along the perimeter through these kind of channels and boxes. So these are all workstations. So at every workstation, you get a little ventilator from where you're getting this cool air which is circulating in the system. So even in the afternoon, you get this cool air coming in. We've observed in the last, like since 2016, way up to 2000 and probably 12, 2020, 22, the humidity levels were under check. Right now, Kutch is receiving a lot more rain than what it used to. The humidity levels have changed. So the mathematics of this has gone haywire. So what we have to do now is to upgrade the dehumidification component by increasing the capacity of the condensers to manage that rise in humidity. So while this air is moving through, the interior of this space is also very porous. So there are no closed cabins. The cabins are all boxes with louvers. So you can keep that space open and you can adjust the privacy that you want when you're working with it. So it's like a very different kind of an office plan. So you get these kind of cabins and spaces. This is the typical cabin detail, which is actually a louver. So these are the drawings for that. And these are the data sheets which talk about temperature stability between 24 degrees and 27 degrees in the month of July and in October, which are actually the worst months. So this is a system which records all of the things that we have done and tells you where things stand. These are studies and models that were done of actually the conoid that was constructed. So this was done by a trainee in our office from a sketch, and then there were drawings done, and this is the shuttering detail. So this model was given to the contractor on site to explain how the shuttering needs to be done, and then this is the framework that was constructed. Also, I'm talking about architectural expression in the last set of slides, where these are the deliberations that go into actually creating systems for light, how much light do you need inside. And what we did was there were these conoids which are sliced at different angles above. So as the sun travels in that large gallery space, you don't get the same set of light throughout the day. The light keeps changing within the gallery. And also outside as an expressive form, there is no monotony. However, this is right on the roof, you never see it, but still. So these were studies done using SketchUp at that time to understand where and how to slice things. And then this is a very interesting study where we evolved perforation details for the west and the south facades, where these drawings were made to keep summer sun out and allow the winter sun to flow in. And these are the things that actually inform the expression of the west and the south. It is not about preempting what that west facade would be. It is about addressing what is its problem, how do you mitigate that problem, and then keep yourself open to refining the outcome of that solution. So I think to us, that is the exciting part, because it reveals itself. It is not something that is already drawn up and then you work towards how it should look. It is more important about how it should function and whether the tenets that you have defined for the project to be meaningful are achieved or not, and that the elevations and all those things are an outcome of that, and there is a belief that it will not look too bad. So also about bringing water down, no steel, no plastic pipes, nothing, keep it simple. This is the Natani Amphitheatre in Ahmedabad, which was finished in 2018. Um, Mrinalini Sarabhai was a very eminent artist, Bharatnatyam um, practitioner, teacher, and an institution builder. And she, along with Vikram Sarabhai, actually thought of building this dance school here first. Um, Achyut Kanvende, who was the architect appointed at that time, was also involved with PRL and other projects with Vikram Sarabhai at the time. So this is the Sabarmati, this is the riverfront, and this is where the building is. And this is a brief history. 63, B.V. Doshi builds a small library for them there. Then they get a temple and they put one here. It's an old wooden temple. A.P. Kanvinde builds the dance school, Darpana. Kirti Shah builds the first theatre on the river. Natrani Cafe was built in 99. In 2017, these two galleries were built on the riverfront by HCP, and this wall was under construction by Abhikram as an acoustic wall to enhance the functioning of the theater which was proposed here. This is the old theater. And in 2017-18, we were invited to come and complete the theater project. So when we came in here, this gallery was under construction, this building, this wall was half finished, and we were actually building a film studio here first. So those drawings were already done, and then we connected this project, and that project never happened. So the theater project actually was done between 2017 and 18. So this was the development and studies done by Vikram of the wall, the old theater, the old tree, and this was the back of the library by Doshi. So here you see the library. It's sitting all the way. It actually forms the retaining structure for this theater. This is the old theater. And there's a lot of water damage that this building had suffered. This was a very interesting section. It is like an open book, and the space within was quite interesting. So all of those buildings had to be removed. They were in a bad state. The steps were failing, and the river front had taken away a whole lot of chunk of land from the theater. So this is a photograph of the construction process. That's Kanvinde building at the back. This Kaman was not built by Kanvinde. This was built by Kirtisha. The building in brick behind is that. So we started off by digging the center, which is the well, to harvest all the water that would fall on the steps and use that water to cool the entire seats so that when people come and sit on the seats, they find them cool. Earlier, the people wouldn't come to Natrani in the summers because it was too hot and unbearable to sit on the Kota stone. So that's the process of construction of the well that you see on the left side. This is the existing wall, and these are methods of how the process would be built. Study model of the entire context at 100 scale in detail. Every step, every detail was built in-house, and this was also the model on which we were working to understand all the aspects of ground material articulation with the old and new. The Kanvinde building was perilously close to where we were working, so how do you address that? So many things were involved in this. And so these are the drawings. And in section, if you see, this is the Kanvinde building, this is the control room, the steps, the hollow, the tank, and then the wall, the riverfront road, and Sabarmati. This is the lower level with the green rooms and the mechanical room at the bottom and the toilet block. And this line here from here is actually the access to the water, to the riverfront. The more studies of the steps. So here I'll show you that in the other section. So these are working drawings and details of the whole project to tell you about the complexity of what those things are, but I think the photographs will tell you something better. This is the access to the theater from the main gate. So that's how you move into that space during the day, and that's in the evening. So that's the forecourt, and this is the enclosing wall of the theater, and that is the Kanvende building there. The forecourt, the acoustic wall, and steps going down, and you can actually come out onto the riverfront on the other side if you want to, but that's not an open access. And from here you access the theater. There was an old neem tree which was preserved during construction, and all the work that was to be done was around its roots. So here you have the circular enclosure that defines the ambit of the theatre. This is the old structure and the dance floor which was built by Tanvinde. And the building kind of pays homage to this structure, but also defines its own precinct. So this is the Kanbindi structure coming down. We integrate that with the foundation, make the new foundation, and create this sense of transparency between the old and the new. What you see here is a cantilevered cable stayed catwalk, which is a very, very important component of this building. Not only is it functionally important, but it is also one of the most important space defining elements of that theater. Because when you are seated here, this kind of scales that space for you. And at night, the space almost disappears with the lights actually focusing down. So inside this tiered seating are cooling pipes which keep it cool, and the water goes down and circulates. And in the section or the underbelly, I will come to that later. But this is how the upper level forecourt, the entry, and the space is seen. So this is the structure that holds that cable stay. This is the arc. This is the arm that comes and holds this. And these are the cables that pull the structure back and keep it stable. And one of the important criteria of this project for this structure was that it should be completely vibration free. So there are these lights that are working automatically on servo motors, and they have a certain weight, almost 50 to 60 kilos or 80 kilos per fitting, and those actually have dynamic load. So it was very interesting to work with the detail and the architectural aspects along with Mehul Shah, who was a structural engineer, and a lot of back and forth to understand where he's coming from and what is our intent in terms of keeping the structure light and also stable. So this is the material articulation. So there's Kota stone and there's pebblecrete and China mosaic. There's an electrical fitting here. And inside the China mosaic, at the bottom, you see these diffusers. So inside of these are the pipes which bring in the cool air out into the thing. And that's the access. These are all lime bricks, lime mortar, very little use of cement except wherever there was reinforced concrete. Otherwise, it's all in lime and lime mortar. This is the green room inside with all of Medalli Sarabai's old travel posters and program posters which were collected as part of their um, uh, archives is displayed inside this. So that's the backstage movement to the green room, and this is the door towards the riverfront. And this is how the plaza gets used. Morning concerts happen in the forecourt for classical music, and this is what it seems like when there is a concert. So this is, I think, Indian Ocean playing uh, in Natrani. And what is interestingly used is that all these brick wall surfaces are used for multiple projections and all kinds of interesting performances using the surfaces of the building to take it to a completely different level. So this is the palette that you leave behind knowing that something like this is going to happen, and this is so beautiful and gratifying to see. This photograph is from our own studio where we talk about shade. I'm shifting to another realm, and surface and glass and the outside structures that allow for nature to take over. And when you provide the armature, things will happen. And this is part of most of the homes that we build. If you provide an architectural gesture for something to come, then it will come and it will make it even more beautiful. Architecture doesn't end at you, it is about leaving it for something else to take over, but also preempting what one can do. So, this is a very interesting house, and the lady of the house is very proud of her garden ever since. This is our own studio where we address the idea of porosity within a space and layered outside, apparent opacity from the outside, but extremely porous from within. That is, I think, most important in our context. And here we have the screen outside, the cheek screen, the glass, and then the inner habitable space. Shielding from the heat can happen in many ways. This is in our own home with a papdi veil. The entire balcony is covered with papdi. This is the south facade. So we can harvest the papdi before the monkeys, and there's always this competition with the monkeys. And then you can use this veranda in summer with actually no heat but a lot of coolness. On the right is the veranda towards the pond where the simple granite screens are anchored into the ground to create the kind of shielding you want. And then this is a house in Ahmedabad where again you have glass, you have cheek, and then you have the screen on the outside. And this is a house in Baroda from my cousin where an existing building was retrofitted because it used to get extremely hot on the south and south on the west. So this is introducing layers within that for it to function. This is a detail of a house in Adipur where there is a terrace on the west side. There is a skylight which brings light deeper into the space. Then there is a recessed window and there is this veil. This was just after it was completed and handed over. Right now, this is all covered with bogle. So you create this kind of a thing which you leave. And of course, the simpler thing in our house is about just planting bananas outside your window if it gets too hot. I particularly like this slide. I discovered this person, again going back to the Jola, and I took this photograph from across the street. He was looking at me, but I was looking at all these things that he had put in, and he's sitting there all ready to start his workday with a very, very strong conviction about his belief in his own craft. And I thought about that, and then I saw this. Okay, so I thought this was Jola worthy to remind us that we need to take pride in our own abilities, in our own ways of doing things, rather than trying to emulate and ape other people. We are fortunate to have a huge body of architecture professionals in the country. Also, peers who are doing extremely good work. And so we draw a lot of inspiration from them all the time. We also draw inspiration from efforts by students in a certain direction which is passionate as teachers. So I think these are the things which are very Zola worthy actually. So there's big. I'm a fan of this person. Slight repetition here, but I'm going to go to this. Okay. So this is the Adipur house, which I will quickly show you. So there's a family of Ahir farmers, and they own cows and they own farms and all that. And they visited the LLDC museum and saw that there were a whole lot of things done there for thermal comfort. So they approached us that can this thing be done in a home? So I was very excited about the prospect of working in Adipur, which is a very humid and dusty and very difficult place to build in. So we went and met them, and we actually did this house for them. So it's a very interesting family, as you will see. Here it's a kind of a deepish plot with a street on one side, and it goes almost about 90 feet, and it's about 29 feet like this. Um so these were initial ideas after meeting them and going to the site about where is what, which is the orientation, what's going on outside, who are your neighbors, how tall are the buildings, what is the context defined by. So these are a quick notes that one takes. And this family actually um, wanted certain zones of privacy within the house. So you see, you come in from here, you enter here, you pause here, you come here, and this is like the delo, the first entry space. Then you come into this space, which is for the outsiders, and there's a staircase here, and then there's a blank wall. And then you walk in here, and there is one bedroom here. There is, you walk further in, and this becomes the family space. This is the grandfather's room. This is the baitak, and this is the puja, and this is the kitchen. And this opens to the back. This is the east, this is the west. So model studies about shading. So that's the big mass you see. That big mass is the south, and this opens to the west, and that is the shield from the south, and this is on the west side it opens, and the east side it opens. And then this is the family, and this is the engagement with them, explaining to them what the model is, explaining and understanding them. And this engagement was quite interesting. It was very, very incredible to know how sharp this lady was, her understanding of her land, her understanding of the sun, the breeze, and quick to point out to one of our co-workers who were traveling that the person didn't understand where the north is. So there was a lot of learning from her. She was very firm. She knew what she wanted, and there was a lot of deliberation like this in their home over 1 year till the design was finalized. And then it went on like this. This is what it is when it was finished. It sits in this kind of a context. This is the back of the house. Simple details, lime, metal and stone, kota stone inside. And one wonders what the interior should be. And so they thought that a lot of the things we were talking to them about old furniture, about old things that have vanished from Kutch, we actually found all of this in Ahmedabad in a warehouse. And they were, kind of laughing. Okay, all this belonged to us at one point in time, and it has now traveled to the urban centers. And when we want it back, we have to come to Ahmedabad to buy that Kutchi furniture and take it back to Kutch. This is the reality. But what was interesting is that all of this became part of the lifestyle that they were used to, without imposing on them that this is how it should be. And so old furniture for the grandfather, his bedroom, how his bedroom actually looks into the space of the family room, completely changing and understanding privacy in a very different way. Our levels of privacy and others in certain parts of the country, we have to understand those. They are very different, and there is no same sort of way of viewing that. During this process, they wanted everything in line, so we actually set up this process of buying the lime from Nagaur, bringing it to Kutch, buying the chakki, and uh, making lime on site. This is the first time we practice something called a hot lime mix, which means you are hydrating the lime in the grinder, mixing with surki and other proportions, and using that straight away for masonry. And again, this is a confined masonry building that uses lime bricks. So this was a very interesting exercise because when we went to buy this chakki, we actually stumbled upon some karigars working on a house where they were mixing the lime and straight away using it in stone mortar. And then we realized so many things about how and why it is important and why hot lime mixes are actually a done thing. So there is a lot of learning every time you attempt to do something, you're doing it differently. We also have been very careful about how masons work. So you have to understand that this is almost like dosa batter, no? And gentle, and it kind of slips between the bricks inside. And then when that happens, there are no cavities inside. So this was very important to understand how the masons actually should be working. So this was a demonstration to the masons about how we wanted them to work and train. And then here, so this gentleman had worked with lime some 20 years back. And after that, he had never worked with lime. So there was a whole relearning for him. And we were conducting these workshops on the site to bring them up to speed. And then they finished the whole building on their own. So in this building, you have rainwater harvesting, you have radiant cooling system where there are pipes in the low slab which drain the water down. So over here is the harvesting tank and the water goes to the roof and comes back to the tank. The blue water is the water that's going away and the red is what is coming down and circulating outside the tank, allowing the water heat to be dissipated into the earth and then it comes into the tank. So this is the construction of the tank. These red pipes are actually coming from the slab and they come all the way down through the ground and they wrap around the tank, and then you're building this cylinder and the dome, and over here what you do, oops, sorry. So here we are filling the cavity with waste lime slurry. We had a whole lot of rubble and waste lime lying around. So we mix that up and we packed the side of the tank for better stability and better thermal uh, sort of absorption. So this is the diagram that explains how the red is what receives the heat, orange is the one which is in shade, and then what are the different parameters that one addresses thermal comfort with. So you have the harvesting, you have the awnings, surki bricks, you have the bamboo trellis, and you have radiant cooling. So all the things that we talked about are encapsulated in this single project as elements. So that becomes the kit of parts or the tools with which you can assemble them based on a certain understanding and logic of the site and program and come up with something which is interesting. The last one is the Ajrak studio, and then we'll. Are we good? So going back to Kutch again, the Ajrak studio in Ajrakpur is very close to the LLDC building, um, and it is the place for um, Ajrakpur is a village which was resettlers from Damanka moved to Ajrakpur and set up this new colony for people. So here is these are vignettes of Kutch, the run and the people, and the destruction and the context of where we ended up working. This is Ajrakpur village, where the craft of Ajrak is practiced. And Ajrak textile, these are references from various parts of Rajasthan. The use of the textile this gentleman is wearing, and that's Ismail Khatri and his two sons with our model for their new workshop, and this is their old workshop, and he was our patron for this project. So this is Ajrakpur village with the village access. That's LLDC project, and then you come in like this. This is the Jamaat Khana, the mosque, and that is where the Ajrak studio was built. And over here is the water recycling plant and the rest of the colony, which was actually laid down and occupied by the weavers soon after the earthquake. So this is the character of Ajrakpur village. Yeah. And in this space, the most beautiful Ajrak textiles come out. The most industrious people work here, and a craft which dates back almost 4,000 years is practiced here. So this is the context. It's very sort of sparse, open land, and then that's where the old studio was. This is their house, and this compound is within which where we built the studio. It draws from a certain typology that you see in Kutch. The homes with inward sloping courtyards that shield, habiting spaces with tall volumes, and a certain regularity of form, which directly comes from the notion of the street and the um, the orientation of the sun in relation to the buildings. So here we have the existing house, their bathing space, and the male quarter. Then there is an open court, and the old workshop used to be here. So this was our site for the workshop. So this wall kind of continues to their house on the other side, and this is how it sits on the edge of the street. So this is almost like a little otla from where you enter, and what you see here is the shop, that is the main volume, and on the other side, uh, you so this is the entry and the uh, entrance part, and the roof on which textile is dried. And that's the plan. So you enter here. This is the space where Ismail Bhai sits. This is an orientation space with a TV screen where there are videos running of the craft. So people come and sit there and see the video. And then this is the print shop where demonstrations happen. So this Ismail Bhai used to be constantly hounded by people and visitors from all over the world to explain the craft. And so he thought that there should be a place where he can actually experiment and practice his craft, but he can also teach other people the higher aspects of Ajrak. So while they have these production workshops in Ajrakpur village, this is a very special space where he really researches a lot on the future of Ajrak as well. So there is a zone for washing. There is a bhatti here for processing, the print shop, stores, toilets, and his own space. And on this side is the storage, and this is the shop. So it is important to see drawings along with photographs, not just photographs. That's why they're here. So you understand the section, the scale of this, and what was actually built. And the roof and the form of how this sits. In this cross section, the story is told. What are the thermal design strategies again? So over here in the roof, there is a ventilator. That ventilator is kept open at night. So the cool breeze actually circulates. During the day, it exhausts the heat out. And here also there is a crack here from where the air moves through the courtyard. And then there are cooling pipes in the floor here everywhere. This is the indigo vat which sits in the courtyard where indigo is prepared. And underneath this structure is a huge harvesting tank that takes all the water, and that water is used to keep the floor cool and also used for processing of ajrak. So these are photographs of how this piping was done and the diagram that explains it. The inner space of the ventilator, which is an eccentric ventilator with a fly mesh, and it operates and shuts on a cable. These are the cables that you use to pull and operate them. The inner space material, which is robust, pebblecrete, cota stone, lime, lime mortar, lime plaster. The drying structure, the harvesting system, and robust details in timber and louvers, which allow you to operate the building depending on the kind of heat and the breeze that flows. So it's a very this building can shut itself up when there is a sandstorm, but it can also open itself up for continuous ventilation. Here, the metal structure supports the bamboo above, becomes an independent structure that comes and sits on the plinth, doesn't touch the line. And so this is a completely different system that's articulated with the plinth. While the chajja is part of the building surface like this. One interesting thing I want to point out is this detail here. There is a this rod goes into the wall and there is a cuddy here. And that cuddy is not supposed to touch the line because line corrodes the metal. So the Karigar actually made a Katori depression here. He's dipped the plaster with a circular movement, making sure that the rod goes in and the plaster allows that rod to go in safely without touching it. And this is what emerges through the interaction between us and the Karigar. And this detail cannot be imagined on a drawing. It is something that comes out of a certain deeper concern and an understanding of the behavior of metal and lime, which becomes and basically leads to something like this. The inner space where the fabric is stored, the central space with these screens, that layer, that's Ismail Bhai's space, this is the entry space, and this defines the space where the visitors sit. So when you can roll this up and this becomes a big hall for multiple events. Details made from recycled wood, simple sturdy things which actually kind of are inspired by the blocks that they use. So this is a bamboo which they use to mix the indigo in the vat. And so we gave them one putty so they can hang that there. And then we suddenly realized that you see the pebblecrete and the kota and the lime, the rough lime, the smooth lime, and the bamboo coming together to form this. Here, there was an experiment done on lime plaster inside the studio, block printing on wet Sanla plaster using natural indigo. So this he was enjoying this process so much. He was dipping his blocks in the indigo and pushing it into the lime. So it's formed this permanent library of motifs on the wall. And these are the various oxide examples that we did sampling. And this is the print studio now. This is where the demonstrations happen. This is the back wall with all the motifs. The doors open up to the courtyard, and those doors open up. So there is a whole lot of transparency that evolves across within the space. So once this was done, we thought that we should, put together what life here is today. And so you can watch this, and I can take a breather. That song was in Charan Bhasha, and what it meant was that the pastoralists actually are singing in praise of the ajrak fabric and how beautiful it is and how it keeps them cool in the summer. And that is, and they're also celebrating the craft, they're celebrating its value and virtue, and also the artisans who have created it. So that is what that song was about. And it was composed and sung by Kintu Gadvi in Ahmedabad for this video clip which was made. And I end with this little piece by Ivani Palasma. Thank you.